Hi guys, Mike from Mike's Gaming Gala here, and today I saw on my feed a video from Brian's Man Cave talking about has gaming changed, gaming then versus gaming now. And I thought it was a really interesting topic, and he had some pretty neat thoughts on it. And I figured I'd do my first video response to somebody and kind of give my thoughts on that topic. So, gaming then versus gaming now. What's different? What has changed? And the premise that he had was that he was talking with somebody who said that, when they were a kid, they would play and they would grind and really, really work hard to get good at a game and then beat it. And now her children, while they're big gamers, if something is too difficult, they'll just drop the game and play something else. They don't have that same kind of impetus to just drive and grind and grind and grind and try to beat a game. And one of the main reasons that he was talking about was that there's so much variety out there now. You've got Xbox, you've got PlayStation, you've got Switch, you've got, whatever else. And maybe you've got old systems as well. And just the massive amount of games that you can potentially play, that's going to mean that you don't focus on one. Whereas opposed to when we were kids, maybe we had a choice of 10 or 15 games in our collection. You might go and rent a game from the video store, but that was temporary. You might trade with your friends, but you didn't have the same kind of variety. And he posed that that was a big reason why we would grind and focus on a single game, whereas kids today, maybe not so much. And while that's certainly true, and I'm certain that that's a part of it, there's another big thing kind of about the history of video games and the evolution of video games that I wanted to talk about, in how the actual industry has changed and how that has changed us as gamers as time goes on. I come from the era of gamer where I started off with the Atari 2600, and with the Atari 2600, the vast majority of games don't have an ending. They're mostly single-screen games. You're playing for points, and you play and play and play until you die. The whole concept of beating a game was pretty foreign to me until about 1989, where for Christmas, my brothers and I, we finally got an NES. So right there, you have a mentality of not necessarily I'm going to beat a game and being okay with that. So if something's difficult and you keep dying, you're just playing for fun anyway. Now, a lot of those games, especially for modern mentalities, they get boring after a while. And in fairness, I'm not the type that likes to play for points. I do like to play to a goal. There are certain arcade games that I love to play, and I will play over and over and over again, like Space Invaders. I'm a huge Space Invaders fan. But just the idea of playing specifically for points doesn't really excite me as a gamer. I play for fun, and of course I love all the arcade ports for fun, but if I'm going to sit and grind at something, it's not going to be for points. It's going to be for an ending. And that didn't come into my life until the NES. And really that came more to gaming with the NES and the Master System and that kind of mid-80s shift from arcade-style gameplay to a more dedicated home console kind of gameplay. And the way to look at the difficulty levels, I like to view it as a lot of modern games, their value is dictated by how long it would take you to beat the game. A lot of reviews that I used to watch would be like, you should be able to beat this game in about 15 hours, or you should be able to beat this game in about 4 hours, and that would be viewed as very bad. Whereas old games, I'm no speedrunner, I'm not a fantastic game player, but I can beat Super Mario Brothers in 15 minutes. Using the warps, you get to the last level. As long as I maintain my flower power, I can beat this game in 15 minutes. Super Mario 3, half an hour, 40 minutes. Again, using the 2 whistles and getting to the end and beating it. I can do that. Hell, even Contra, I can beat in about 30, 40 minutes without having to use a continue when I'm at my best. Based on the media size, that's pretty much as big as these games could be. They would have, really, if they were any easier, they would be very short games. So how do you extend that? You make them hard as hell. You make games like the Mega Man series, which I got a few of them here, that I remember renting for a weekend. Mega Man 2 was one that we rented several weekends in a row, and just like Heat Man with the disappearing blocks and falling in. A lot of NES games are difficult, almost to the point of unfair. Anybody who's come across that bird at the end of Ninja Gaiden knows what I'm talking about. It's unfair. And so why did we sit and grind and try to beat these games that were very difficult and very unfair? I don't think it was so much because there wasn't a wide variety of games. I would go to the video store and there would be a choice of 50, 60 games there, and 99% of them would be for the system that I owned. So it wasn't like, oh, that's a PlayStation game and I've got an Xbox or something like that. There was lots of options, but the problem was they were all hard as hell. And yeah, there are some games on the NES that weren't. You know, Bugs Bunny's Birthday Blowout comes to mind. DuckTales isn't that hard. These are kind of games that I beat as a kid, and they're some of the first games that I had beaten. But you didn't know that looking at them. There was no internet to watch a review to see how hard it was. There was no internet to find walkthroughs or tips and tricks. And really, a lot of these games became much more approachable to me to actually attempt to beat after the internet came along. When I was a kid, I could probably count on 2 hands the amount of NES games that I beat. But I've beaten dozens of them as an adult with the help of the internet. But that was more a matter of the limitations of the media that's contained on a cartridge. They could only fit so much on there. They couldn't make 40 levels for Mega Man. They could make the amount of levels that were there. They could probably make a few more, but you know what I mean. Like the game itself, you know, and speedrunners have proven this, doesn't take that long to beat if you're really good and you know what you're doing. What takes it a long time to beat is the fact that it's hard, or it requires memorization of certain parts, or just practice. And so games have evolved from that, and they have evolved because as the media, the space of media that you could utilize became bigger and bigger, these games could become bigger and bigger and longer without requiring that difficulty to give you the value of the time played. So that allowed game developers to put more into story and put more into kind of cinematic events or trying to build things. And they didn't have to rely on the difficulty. And of course, if you create this beautiful story, you want the player to be able to play through it. And so you're going to reduce the difficulty, or at least present options that would make it easier to play that whole game and play to the ending. For instance, the first Final Fantasy, you have to buy items to be able to save, or you have to go to an inn, or you have to do all that stuff. Whereas, you know, more modern RPGs, you can save pretty much wherever you want, or there's very frequent save points. Playing something like Mario 3, there is no save, there is no password. If you're playing for one sitting, and however long it takes you, If you want to beat the game, however long that takes, that's how long you're playing. You can't save and come back later. But with modern games, you can. With modern games, you've got like regenerative health. You even have AI that's going to compensate if it notices that you die frequently at a certain place. Some games actually make it easier. That's not to say that there aren't hard games now. You've got Elden Ring, you've got the Dark Souls games, stuff like that. And they certainly have their followings, and they have, they do really well. That's not to say that gamers now aren't as good as gamers were back then. It's just to say that our idea of what qualifies as a good game and what presents that value has changed over the years. So when you have that more story-based and you've got that kind of better compensation for not being fantastic at a game, it then makes you less willing to grind at a game when you know that the other options out there will provide you with a similar experience without the difficulty. And that's because, beating a game, getting to certain points at a game, that gives you a sense of accomplishment. It releases dopamine. It makes you feel good. That's why, they've got achievements and trophies now. Because the game itself isn't enough. You gotta, okay, well, now you can go and do this and do this and do this and get extra achievements. And so that's why I think a lot of kids nowadays are just not willing to put in all that effort on a certain game to get really, really good at it. At least in single player. Obviously, online play now has, made kids competitive in a very different way. But there are so many options out there. It's not that there are so many options, it's that there are so many options that don't require that, as opposed to when we were kids. Even though there were a lot of options, there's hundreds upon hundreds, something like 600-700 games for the NES. If you include the European ones, there's like 300 for the Master System. So even by 1990, and then by 1990 you've got the Genesis games starting to come out, Game Boy's starting to come out, you've already got the 7800 and all that stuff. There were plenty of games out there. They were just all hard as fuck. So anyhow, that's my thoughts on it. I want to thank Brian's Man Cave for such an intriguing topic. It's one that I've thought about for a long time, and I'm happy to kind of contribute my thoughts to that. I'll obviously link his video in the comments below, and we'll see you next time on Mike's Gaming Gala.